Welcome to episode 150 of the Necronama.com. The Necronama.com is proud to announce that we've partnered with the Horror Writers Association and the Stanley Hotel and Gemma Amor and Laurel Hightower to bring you the official StokerCon pre-party. We want you to join us on May 10th, 2022 at the iconic Stanley Hotel, where horror authors, including Stephen Graham Jones, Gabino Iglesias, Haley Piper, Gemma Amor, and Laurel Hightower will be reading some of their works. Additionally, the No Sleep podcast will perform a 1-hour live version of their award-winning horror fiction podcast. There will be meet and greets, ghost hunting, and a lot of drinking with authors. You're not going to want to miss it. A link to ticket information and room packages is available in the liner notes of this episode. The Necronama.com is now a proud affiliate of Libsyn, one of the top podcast hosting networks in existence. See this episode's show notes for our unique promo code to get up to 2 free months of podcasting services with Libsyn. Get your show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Get critical audience-building stats and all the support you need to sound your best. They even do video. Bring your podcast to life and have your voice heard here, there, everywhere with Libsyn. Check our show notes for the unique promo code and get podcasting. Now in their 18th year, Fright Rags has been bringing you the best in horror apparel and accessories since 2003. Offering a wide range of products for your favorite creature features, slasher flicks, and cult classics. Officially licensed collections include titles like John Carpenter's The Thing, The Evil Dead, Creepshow, Jaws, the Halloween franchise, and so many more. Head on over to fright-rags.com. Make sure to sign up for their SMS and email newsletter to never miss a drop. Listeners get 10% off when they use the code NECRO10, all caps, at checkout. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now. And everyone here today is just in my head. This is just me talking for the next hour.
And I am Donald R. Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of the podcast you're listening to. And for some reason, I feel like pretty quickly into this show, heads are going to start rolling.
So I'm so glad you went there.
All right. Laurel Hightower is obviously back against her better judgment. And Sandra Ruttan is here for the first time. Welcome to the show, ladies. Why don't you tell our listeners a bit about yourselves?
I'm Laurel Hightower, and I'm an author, but also mostly I'm a bourbon drinker. And I'd just like to say that because of COVID, bourbon has tasted terrible to me for almost a month, and now it tastes good. So this is going to devolve quickly.
Are you already drinking? Oh man,
it sounds like a perfect show.
Don't you hear the ice cubes clinking in my glass? Sandra, you're the adult. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Sandra, and I'm known as an editor and an author, and mostly in crime fiction. But really and truly, what I am is kind of like a harbinger of death. Like, death has been stalking me for my entire life. So, when I was 8, I was hit by a car and suffered head trauma. The next year, I partially severed my right foot, and it took them about 25-30 minutes to get me to the hospital. So it was like touch and go with an 80s blood transfusion, which would have been quite wild. And, then the next year I fell down a waterfall, almost drowned. I've been in a car accident in the Sahara. You name it, I feel like I've kind of done it. And this is why I go on podcasts and don't meet up with people in person, because they're afraid of meteors and shit coming down.
Okay.
I'd just like to say that I survived several interactions with you. I feel okay. I feel good about things. But the Harbinger of Death thing, why isn't that on your bio?
Yeah, no shit. We need shirts.
Yeah.
I mean, I have some of those stories on my Amazon bio because, like just saying what you've done is awfully boring, but I have had really no control over a lot of these things. So
I almost think you should just not explain them though. Like when you're introduced, like how James and Don, you're like, oh, I'm an author, I'm an historian, I'm, podcast this, you'd be like, I'm Sandra, I'm a writer, I'm an editor, and I'm also the harbinger of death. And then just leave it. Just right there.
Leave
Don't
it right
explain.
there.
Yeah, just let that be your
We could add an echo effect. It'd be pretty sweet sounding.
Deepen the voice a little bit.
The harbinger of death,
And I am
great.
I am the harbinger of death. It awaits me at every step, literally.
Oh man.
Oh.
So on that note,
I'm probably only still alive just because I needed to do this particular podcast.
oh my God.
So once we're done, all bets are off.
Oh boy. So you two have a book you're edited together. Tell me about it.
Well, so I was very foolish and had an idea for an anthology, and it was for identity horror. And I mentioned it on Twitter, and Sandra got in touch with me, and we already knew each other. We're already friends, and said she was interested in working together on editing it. And I'm so glad because she always like very gracefully says, "Oh no, you've done your share." And I really I haven't. I'm I probably did like 25% of it. So Sandra has done amazing work on it, and we're just really excited. We got a lot of submissions. We got over 600. And
wow.
We are super, super pleased with what we have in the book, and also but also, man, there were a lot of hard ones that were very hard to pass by. So, in a way, I also just feel like, that was a lot to sort through, but it also, I don't know, I kind of felt privileged to have gotten to read those things because so many people really just bled on the page, just in a really beautiful way.
And I think that Laurel's far too modest because she's done a tremendous job with the anthology. And doing an anthology, working together is always different than friendship relationships. And sometimes it can cause a lot of conflict. This has just been smooth and seamless. And Laurel's vision for what this was to be really resonated with people. And I think that's why we got such a great response from the writers who submitted to it. So, it really was a privilege. And I always consider it a privilege that when writers trust me with their words, and these are incredibly personal stories, a lot of them. And so it's kind of, just even a greater privilege to be able to work with writers with these stories.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
No, that's awesome. So for people who already know, I'm also editing an anthology with Laurel. And ours is very different. It's invitation only. So if you guys don't mind, and you can tell me to fuck off instead, I would love to ask you, I never get to hear about editors talking about the horrible little process of having to say no to a story you love. Can you give me some insight on that?
Yeah,
Sandra, I usually put it off as long as possible. It's really hard when it comes down to it to say no to something that you really feel strongly about. And when I tell writers, that their story was really close, when I write a more personal rejection, that I mean it. So and what I actually did was I picked up a couple of submissions and published them online last week on darkdispatch.com for an on-site issue. And I also took some extra submissions for that as well. But there were a couple of stories that, when we were making the final cuts, these ones didn't make it. But I decided that I wanted to put them online if they were available, and the authors were game to do that. So, and we must have extended the budget at least twice. I think we really tried to take as many stories as we could out of the ones that were nearest and dearest to our hearts. So,
yeah. I agree. I think it was eye-opening and, helped with the perspective from someone who writes and submits to anthologies as well, is just realizing that like the vast majority or cuts that we made or rejections that we did solely because it just didn't quite fit this book. And you often don't even know exactly what tone it's going to take beyond your general theme until you really start reading the stories and see what's going to make it up. So it's so often about that specific book. It's so often about that specific publication and not about a writer's work. So, I mean, in particular with this, like, I'm sure it's, probably people, there might be people who got rejected and giving me the middle finger over this, but there is, to me, it's very heartening and very cool to know that those stories were written for this and are now out there. And I very much hope those authors find another spot for it or put it in a collection, because they're just really, really stellar.
Yeah, that's really cool. No, I feel like, oh, go ahead.
No, I mean, I was just going to say, sometimes it really is just down to a question of degrees, and it's so close, and you've already got a story that's dealing with motherhood identity. So, so then ones that are hitting that theme, it's harder for them to get a spot. And that's just sometimes the way that it goes. So it isn't always, I think a lot of times, as a writer, I've certainly gotten my share of rejections. Everything I submitted last year was rejected, every single thing. And it's the way that it goes. Sometimes it's just, you're just not landing at the right time. And sometimes it's, I've already got XYZ that's covering this. Yeah. And so you have to make those tough calls, and sometimes, and I mean, I don't mean this to undermine the stories that are in the collection, because they are fantastic, but sometimes, I mean, it's an apples and oranges thing. And it there were easily, I would say, 15, 20 stories that could have been in this collection in a heartbeat. It could have gone a different way with a number of the submissions. When I think once we narrowed it down to like the final 45 or 50 or so, that was, those were the hardest debates that we had. So,
yeah, I mean, I just look at Twitter and how people lose their minds of either I'm the worst writer ever because I'm constantly rejected, or you get the, well, they only took their friends in this book, or that kind of thing. And I feel like a lot of that is out there because writers do live in such a vacuum that we don't get to see these other sides, and we don't get to see how close we came. We're not getting a, hey, sorry, you got 16th instead of 15th. You know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to hear that directly from you guys, because maybe some writer out there needs to hear that.
Yeah, and you know what they say about close, right? It only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. Like, I mean, it writers look at it as a yes or a no, and we tend to look at those rejections as like being rejected for our entire selves. And this, a lot of times our writing's very personal to us, and so we feel it. But rejections are a valuable training ground that prepares you for reviews after you're published.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So honestly, it's just part of the process. A lot of times editors are just making really tough calls, and that's the way that it goes. So it's unfortunate. I would have loved to have doubled our number of stories, but the budget just wasn't there for that. So, but as it is, we've got an incredibly tight anthology with a lot of extremely compelling stories. And I feel like people are going to relate to all of those stories in different ways. So
very cool. So when does it come out?
Next
the 1st month, March.
Oh, March 1st.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, the pre-order is up for the ebook, and it's on Goodreads if anybody wants to add it. And I'll segue over that's the reason why we chose the movie Identities, because it's identity horror.
How did you know I would ask that?
I just figured I'd head you off.
Wow.
Just to be
amazing.
that guest.
She's psychic?
I'm a podcast control freak. I'm awful. You can
We
take over
love
your
it.
job right now.
Perfect.
Sorry.
I'm out of here. It's been a while since I quit. So, no, so tell me about that connection. Like, aside from just identity itself, like, obviously, the name of the film here, but, like, what is it about identity horror that pulled you into this anthology, and then also this film? Like you're in charge now, so tell me how to mix those.
I will say that I actually just chose the movie based solely on the damn name.
Sweet.
Because you were like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't know. Has anyone done Identity? That's easy. But in the 4.5 seconds since you've asked that, I've thought it over a lot. And actually, I mean, I think that it's applicable in a lot of ways, like, because identity is so much the I in our head. Right. Like,
Okay.
there's the external pressures, there's the societal views of us. Like the big thing that really was with me when I suggested this anthology topic, there was a lot going on with respect to Asian hate. There was a lot going on with, like, the George Floyd murder, Me Too movement, a lot of things, and and trans rights and things like that. And it's just so much of our identity is handed to us by people outside of our own heads, but it translates, right? Like, it becomes our internal voice. And for me, a big part of that was, like, becoming a parent, like becoming a mother, just almost. And that's not, it's not a complaint. Like, I absolutely love being a mother. It's my favorite thing about my life, like, completely. But it really does strip you of a lot of things. And a lot of that is external. There's simple needs, of a kid that you're taking care of, but there's also just the way that people see you, the expectations they have of you, the fact that, in the American workforce, they could really give a fuck, but I will exclude my job from that because they've been amazing. But yeah, I mean, and so Identity, this particular movie, it's all of the identities, all of the people that this guy created, to match all of those. And in some ways, when I don't know. Yeah, that's it. I'm going to stop the sentence right there.
No, I think that's good. I think that you said it's our inner voice, and I think that that's so interesting how, with this film in particular, like, just to spoil the shit out of it, you have 3 seconds to turn this off before I ruin the end of this film. All right, close enough. So, we have this multiple personality, dissociative identity thing going on, and each of these is an inner voice, and it is an identity. But also, they're all doing exactly what you were just talking about. They're all slapping each other with what they think the other person's identity is based on what they see. You're just a limo driver. You're a slut. You're a cop, even though you might not be. You're an escaped or not escaped yet, but you're a convict. Everybody slaps this identity on. So I think that really ties into what you were just saying. And I think that you summed it up amazing for thinking about it for 4.5 seconds.
Why, thank you.
Sandra, do you have anything to add to that of why you wanted to get into this anthology and this film?
I think that we spend our whole lives, first of all, trying to figure out who we are. And we grow up with different pressures from family members, from teachers. I mean, I was the second child in the family with a straight A student sister. It wasn't that I wasn't smart, but the minute that I walked into a teacher's classroom, I mean, they're like, "Oh, you're Darlene's sister." And the expectations were on, you know what I mean? Like, we all grew up with that in different ways. And then we're constantly trying to shed other people's expectations and then decide which ones that we want to accept. And I mean, social media is like a game of that, like 24/7, because everything that people do on social media shapes people's perceptions of them. But it's such a controlled amount of information. And so that's why, social media loses its mind when somebody gets outed as being somebody that they're not, or what have you. Like, so it's fascinating to me to see how much identity it's in the fabric of who we are, but also all of our relationships. Every single thing that we do throughout every single day is shaped by what people think about your identity and the assumptions that they make about you based off of your identity. And we get a lot of that in this film. So, I find it really fascinating. Also, I think that in the last few years, I think that we've been challenged to really evaluate our own assumptions, our preconceived ideas about people based on their race, religion, gender, and whatnot, and to really try to um, I use the term decolonize your mind, right?
Mhm.
To change our thinking about other people, or to not let our presumptions get in the way of really seeing them as an individual, and instead just putting a label on them. And I think that this, both this movie in its own way and, the anthology that we were doing really get into the heart of that, of looking at reasons why people make assumptions about other people and how we both limit and harm people when we do that.
I love that. Don, do you have anything you want to add to all this?
Well, I mean, are you sure you want to ask me this question?
Yes, I do.
Okay. and our two wonderful guests have explained it well. And I have to give my perspective on it as well because, James asked or told. But I mean, ultimately, that's what identity comes down to is you don't really know who you are if your identity is being shaped by other people, right? So you have to explore exactly what your relationship is to the world, especially when we have this moment where there's conflict between all these different characters in his head. You don't exactly know where you fit into the world as long as somebody else is telling you how you fit into the world. So it behooves you to figure it out for yourself. And again, just like Sandra, I'm still trying to figure it out because it's one of those things that identity is never static. It's changing. It's changing the way that you're perceived, but also the way that you perceive yourself, the way that you shape your identity, the way you reflect it upon other people, whether it's the way that you speak, your background, your religion, the clothing that you wear, your interests, things like that. So it's interesting to look at the way the interaction takes place between these different characters, between these different personalities, because that's honestly an internal monologue. I don't want to say as far as the multiple personalities, because I don't want to demean that, but it's definitely an internal monologue that we often have with ourselves about who we actually are, and exactly what makes us up, and how we want to be seen and how we don't want to be seen. So it's definitely an important thing to understand. I think, at least for my limited understanding of psychology, I think this movie does a decent job of capturing how identity itself, or at least people sometimes struggle with identity, or even judging other people based off their identity. Where I think I've had this discussion with you, James, before. I might have had this with you as well, Laurel, at the last conference. Um, if this lady's out there, I wish nothing but the worst of you to you. Um, we often start evaluating people by what they do. And it's a simple thing as far as like, hey, what do you do for a living, or where do you work, or whatever. And sometimes it's an innocent question because, oh, I don't know where to start a conversation with you, right? So here's something I can have. I can have some familiarity with you. Like, oh, I'm a teacher. Oh my God, yeah. What do you teach? Oh, I teach this subject. I teach this age group. I teach here. I teach. So at least there's a way that you can start. But some people take that as a way to determine what your worth is. So when there's discussion about, oh, you're just a limo driver, or you're just a cop, or you're just a whore, whatever, or whatever, your background might be. Even John C. McGinley's character, he kind of has this self-doubt because it's like, oh yeah, I'm not Timmy's real dad. I'm his stepdad. I came into his life 2 years ago. So you have that self-doubt about who you are and where you fit. But yeah, we ran into this past summer where at a conference where an individual sat down with us as a group and was asking what each of us were doing. And before we could, or I should say before I couldn't remember if this happened to everybody else, but before I could finish saying what I did, this person moved on because what I did wasn't interesting enough to them, because they wanted to talk to a publisher they wanted to talk to somebody that could get their book some distribution. And I think I might have said under my breath, I might have said, well, fuck you too.
You definitely did.
Okay. Because
you should have said it louder.
Yeah, I should have.
Yeah.
But I was like, no, this is the first day of the conference. I don't want to mess with a sinner. So inside.
That's only funny if you were sitting there, but that was hilarious.
But I mean, that's unfortunately what we do. Then what ends up happening is you question your value depending on what somebody, if you have a little bit of self-doubt, you then question what your value is within the system. So if somebody says, oh, you're a teacher. Oh, okay, that's cool. And then they go on to another thing. It's like, well, I think what I do is important. And you do have start, even if you fully believe, you do start to have that self-doubt. So I think that was a great addition into this conversation and interaction between the characters, where they did have that moment where, Amanda Pete's character is fearful because of the life that she had and always worried about her safety, or Ray Liotta's character is concerned about, exactly, am I going to be exposed for the fraud I am? Or Timmy's, completely shuts down. And John Cusack's character is trying to be bigger than what he is. But then also the actress, it's that insecurity that comes with, she doesn't exactly know where her career is going anymore. So, I mean, you see how this fully manifests itself. So, James, what do you think?
I don't know.
About
just leave it up
identities.
to everybody else.
See, I'm not going to let you get out of this anymore.
No. Honestly, most of the stuff I want to talk about, we got to do a little later because I don't want to totally change this. So do either of you have anything to add to what he said before we move in a different direction or continue from here?
It's just something that I noted, when John said that we start evaluating people by what they do. And it was something that I had actually written down after watching the movie, that the first words to Ed after the accident were, "What have you done?" They were about what he had done. And then when the couple stop in their car and he's like, "Do you have a cell phone?" I mean, clearly you're driving along and you can see that there's this vehicle stopped up ahead. You can see there's somebody on the road. I mean, even in the rain, you can see that there's stuff going on. He's like, "Do you have a cell phone?" And what was his name? Lou, the husband. He's like, "Who wants to know?" And then he says, "We don't know you." And it's like, it was just so, it really struck me that it was like, but what, at first I thought, like, wasn't that bizarre that the first thing that he really wants to evaluate this guy on is who he is.
Right.
But then it kind of hit me that this was a guy who was stepping into his own new role because he had just gotten married. And so it was like he was suddenly trying to assert himself as the protector husband or something, like that he thought that this was like, here we are out in the middle of nowhere, stopped by some guy on the side of the road. He's all of a sudden going to talk tough, even though, he's over in the passenger seat and his new bride is driving and is the one who's right next to this stranger, right? So, I just thought that it was really interesting how this movie highlighted how we judge people based on their careers. We judge people based off of what we know about them, like right from the start, which is what you were talking about, Don. So.
Yeah, no, that's actually something I noticed as well, because the other couple, John C. McClintley, is that his name? Thank you. He's driving. And then this one, like you said, his wife is over there by this guy they don't know. And Lou's running his fucking mouth. Like, if this guy was going to attack somebody, like, Lou's in the safe spot here. And Lou's just running his mouth. Whereas I feel like John would have been I don't know his name in the movie, but I feel like he would have been much more protective and, like in that role of stopping a threat. And I feel like Lou, it says so much about his character that he does what he does instead. It's a great setup.
Agreed.
And it could also be something that speaks to the age too. But I mean, age is an issue we can talk about later if you want.
Sure, we can talk about anything. You guys are in charge. I quit at the beginning of the show, so. So the thing that I told Don I'd have to wait till later. he kind of hit it here. He started talking a little bit about mental health and I don't know exactly how you said it, Don, but I always have this thing. Anytime mental health is brought up in horror, I've spent 22 years now working in the mental health field at different psych hospitals and just different nonprofits. And I am always fascinated by how horror represents mental health and mental illness and these things, and how for so long it's been the thing that makes them different and makes them evil. And now we're getting these cool ass stories about why living with it is horror in itself. And I'm loving this change or transition, if you will, but we're definitely still not there. And as I'm watching Identity, I had a totally different take than the first couple times I saw it, because I saw it when it was relatively new. And I thought, oh, wow, this is really amazing and all these things. And then this time I'm watching, I'm like, this is kind of shitty in a way, because it's all, oh, he only kills people because he's crazy. He's not one of us. We wouldn't do this. We don't have these things inside of us. Mm-hmm. And so my biggest thing that I wanted to talk about with this is mental health and our representations of it in horror, and also like our responsibility in writing mental health. And I don't know that we need to fully go there this episode, or I don't know where you guys want to go or what you want to talk about, but I just wanted to at least hit that generalized thing of there's this transition happening, and I'm so excited that it's starting to take form, even though it's horror, so everything takes longer than it should.
Well, it's not just horror.
Definitely not. No.
I had a couple years ago, I wrote a book that was definitely one of the more personal ones for me, and it deals with a teenager who is coping with her mother who has bipolar disorder and also being bullied. And these are two things straight out of my life, although the story is itself fictitious. A lot of this was very much first hand or strongly influenced by experiences that I had. And when my agent was shopping it around, the kinds of rejections that we would get were well, we want issues stories, but not these issues. So, I mean, we really do. It is an important discussion. It is something that we need to look at, because I do think that when we hold on to stereotypes, we perpetuate falsehoods about people's identity, and it makes it harder for people to really come forward. I mean, my grandfather died in a mental institution. I was 17 when I found my mother hallucinating after an overdose and got her to intensive care. And after 4 days there, they sent her to the mental institution where her father had died for a psych hold. And that was, and it wasn't until then that she was diagnosed bipolar and started to receive treatment. And the stigma, the stereotype that around mental health issues keeps people from getting help, but it also makes it really hard for us to have important conversations about mental health and about I can see your point about how the character was represented in this. At the same time, I felt like, I guess I looked at him a little bit differently. I didn't think that the reason that he killed was because he was mentally ill necessarily. I wondered if the real reason that he killed was because killing was a way of asserting control over his life, because he had all these bad things happening to him as a child. And when you're a child, you're powerless. Mm-hmm. Other people control you, right? And they put you in boxes, and you see this throughout this movie with how Timmy's treated. Go sit over there. Don't look at that. Do this, whatever. And they keep shunting him to the side, and controlling him. Big mistake. But I wondered, I found, and I don't feel like we necessarily know enough about fully what happened to him as a child. We know that he was I believe, found abandoned. We know his mother was a prostitute. We know that he killed a number of people on his birthday. But I was unclear exactly how old he was when that happened. And I wondered if, because he went through so much trauma as a child, it stunted his development, and inhibited him from, through his journey into adulthood. And if part of the reason that he killed in specific circumstances was to try to take some sense of control over his life. I don't know. I don't know if there's enough in the movie to argue clearly one way or the other, but that was kind of how I looked at it when we watched it the other night. And maybe I'm completely wrong. I don't know.
I like that a lot.
Yeah,
what do you guys think?
Sandra, I think what you said, you mentioned that with Timmy, they kept shoving him to the side, and not explaining things to him, and just treating him as though he wasn't like a full person. And I noticed that they actually, a lot of the men dealt with the women like that too. It's like, there's an explosion and it's like, what happened? Go stand over there. No, I would like an actual fucking explanation. There's a ball of fire out there and some of the people are now missing. Please explain. Go stand over there. I told you to. And that was just the constant, like, no matter what they asked, it's like, you're not worthy of my time in letting you know what's happened. Me and this other Y chromosome are going to run around here and, and fuck things up royally and just not tell you anything. And that kept bugging me. Not just because of the whole, like, lesser person, or I'm not going to waste the time on you, but that just seems to be like and because that's been my experience with a lot of things, is it's like, you don't need to know, right. The how this plays out doesn't involve you. So even if me telling you this stuff would have helped save your life or helped protect mine, or, just generally kind of made this a less fucked up situation, it's better for me to just tell you to shut up and go stand over there. I don't know, like that was something. And I think you're right, Sandra. I think, and I think he killed people as an adult, but that he was found abandoned in the motel at the age of 9, from what I recall. So I thought that was so interesting, with, of course, like, that's where that personality solidified. That's where he stayed. And I feel like that is where the anger came from, was a 9-year-old boy who was, alone and completely ignored and mistreated God knows how. So yeah, I think the whole, just not feeling like people are worthy of having the situation explained to them. And not only that, but made to feel bad for asking the question. I think that's an interesting point to bring up, Sandra.
Yeah, I agree fully.
Yeah, and there's a lot of sexism in the movie, and I do think that once you understand that they're all different personalities within this one person, it makes a certain degree of sense that he might seem less connected to his female personalities. I'm not entirely sure of how all of that works. But the
well, no,
interesting thing
you're onto something. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you're onto something.
Go ahead.
Because it goes back to, even you look at the 3 women, but really the 2 that you really get to see anything. So the mom, she immediately is like out of commission, right? She gets hit by the car. They're very violent deaths for pretty much everybody. But more visual violence is seen to be with the women, right? So you have the woman who was married in Vegas, like, she gets blown up in the car, right? We kind of understand that that's not going to be a good situation. But even when you get the flashback it's shown, but the end with Amanda Peet's character, Timmy brutally murders her, but the killer, George, when he's envisioning killing her, he says, like, whores don't get second chances. So this seems to be a lot of repressed hatred towards women as well. So you've got a point there. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
Well, no, but I mean, if you think about it, I always think about the 3 women in the movie. You're right, there's 4, and that's because Timmy's mom is kind of taken out of commission pretty early.
Mhm.
And it's interesting to me that the woman who seems, at least within the context of the movie, to be the caring, nurturing mother role is killed quickly, because the killer didn't have that in his experience. But the woman who dies last is the one who had been a prostitute. And that's who his rage was directed at, because she represents his actual mother in his mind. No, you don't get to escape. You don't get to go live the nice life growing oranges. I'm going to make you pay for how you hurt me. And that seems to be like, I mean, if you look at everybody, every character in there is a facet of his personality. You can appreciate the idea that he would create a cop, that Ed was the limo driver. That's John Cusack's character. He had been a cop, because you can imagine his desire for stability, for law and order, for a sense of, struggling with right and wrong. If you really think about it, and then he doesn't really know what to do with dads either. So this is why we've got a stepdad, right? And the stepdad is, again, somebody who's trying to step into different roles. First, he's stepped into the role of fatherhood as a step-parent. And then he says at one point, that he tells Amanda Pete's character, Paris, he tells her that usually his mother deals with this when he's like trying to, soothe Timmy and get him to like lie down. And so you can see he's now trying to step into the mother's role, and he doesn't know what he's doing. He's all he is a person who keeps moving into different roles. So we actually don't know anything about this guy at all if you stop and think about it. So it's just interesting, because I really, once you know the end, then you start thinking about the characters through the lens of how the killer, why they would be relevant to him. And you can see him, it makes sense that he really wouldn't know what to do with a new husband or a young woman, in terms of his frame of experience. But the way that they did treat the young woman, there was definitely both a sexism thing going on there and an ageist thing. She was like completely dismissed as irrelevant. Like nobody took her seriously. And I don't know how much of it was about her gender and how much of it was about her age. But from the beginning, she was, and then eventually she keeps getting pushed aside with Timmy. After her husband's killed. She's the one who's lying on the bed with him. She's the one comforting him. She's the one who's going to drive him away, because they don't know what else to do with her. Like, just go be with the young child.
Right.
I didn't even make that connection. I love that. Go ahead, Laurel.
No, I was just going to say, I'm glad somebody was going to be with the kid, because that was killing me that, like, I don't know. It's just like, oh, look, more dead bodies. It's cool. Everything's fine. Just believe a bunch of strangers you just met who are all killing each other. All is well.
And clearly they're not watching Timmy. I mean, I think that's pretty abundant, right?
Yeah,
abundantly
he was able
clear,
to,
right?
He was able to pull off a whole lot of murders. I just wish, like, him walking away, that last scene, him walking away from like the explosion with that smile on his face. Like, I kind of want to adopt him. I'm like, okay? I think we might be related. Come on over here.
You want to adopt Timmy? How much bourbon have you had so far? No,
I'm just saying, my kid's the one who like walks up the deck and says, "This house is dead," and I'm like, "Okay, come on in, sweetheart. Let's get you a snack." I just think I think this kid might get along with us. We could be probably get along.
That's what he needs. It's just the right situation. That's what he needs.
Yeah, and honestly, look, with Tiny's quads, he'd kick his ass. So I'm not really worried about his safety on that.
Good Lord.
No, he's only killed how many people, but it's okay.
But you've never asked how many people Tiny's killed. So.
Oh, well, there's a whole nother podcast that's waiting for us to discuss that. Jeez.
I'm not going to betray his secrets. Are you kidding me? I'm his mother. Protect him until the end of time. All right, I made that really completely go off.
I'm just waiting for this audio to be used.
I was just thinking, like, oh gosh, Child Protective Services.
On an episode of the Necronoma.com, you said that you would protect him no matter what.
Objection, Your Honor. Nobody's ever listened to that show.
Does that include lying, Ms. Hightower?
This is why she established that she was drinking from the start.
Yeah, I can't be held responsible.
Oh my.
He hasn't killed me.
While we're talking about Lou and his wife, I really want to talk about this bathroom scene because
Oh, that was
I
crazy.
wish that I could write something this good. Like, this is my favorite scene in the film, and not in a, hey, this is highly enjoyable way. The way that it twists that feeling of domestic violence and flips it is just fucking brilliant. You know, you have her locked in the bathroom and he's beating on the door and he's angry, and we've seen this in so much stuff, and yet it always hits because this is real life and this is a terrifying thing that happens to people constantly. And she's just in the bathroom, just there's nothing else to do, right? There's nowhere else to go. She's locked the door. And then instead he becomes the victim. And wow, I love that. I love that whole setup and everything about this. But I like also how she can't open the door to see who's doing it. She can't watch what happens because she'd have to violate her safety to do so.
Well, I can jump back because there was something that I think that we definitely need to include when we're talking about Jenny, and this is possibly going into George's. I'm sorry, Malcolm. I keep wanting to call him George. Going into Malcolm's mindset, right, towards women. The only reason why Lou marries her is because he thinks that she's pregnant, right?
Well,
which a lot
says,
of
I own half of what's inside of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole idea that there are men out there that actually believe this shit, which is once there's a seed implanted in your body, like all of that is mine. And I'll go so far as not to even say half, you know, is what some men will say. It's like, that's my child, not that's half of my child. And just that idea that there are a lot of guys out there, because I've been watching a lot of TikTok where people have been making fun of all these male podcasters who give their advice about women.
Stupid male podcasters.
Oh no, it's so bad. It's like, oh, a woman's value decreases when she has a baby. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? But no, it's that same thing of like all these guys with no gold are accusing women of being gold diggers. That's what I got. That's what I got out of Lou. It's kind of like, oh shit. Well, I only married you because I thought you were pregnant, and here you are. You're not even pregnant. And for me, watching that scene, that seems to be what he's the most angry about, is that his life now has to change because this woman tricked him because she wanted to marry him, didn't want to lose him. You know, it's just this weird, toxic masculinity rearing its head again, to where a guy feels as though, I don't know, that he's owed something. Not saying that she should have tricked him, but the whole idea that that's what men believe is going to happen to them, is that these women are going to trick them into marrying them, and, you know, their life is over. That's a simple fix. Oh shit, she tricked me into marrying me? All right, cool. We'll go get this shit annulled tomorrow.
I don't believe that she's not pregnant.
Yeah. I'm going to lose my mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
That is such an interesting thing, though, Don, like that, because when we review this, we have to look at, you know, having seen the movie and knowing how it ends and knowing what the whole premise is. It's like you have to look at, okay, it's not that this is like a valid character. It's that this is how this person with obviously very limited upbringing and social skills and understanding, like, because you can imagine somebody who's completely neglected, setting aside anything else, but let's just say they're totally neglected. Like, how on earth do they become like a human with regular human interactions?
Right.
So most of the critters that you know split off in his head are going to be caricatures. They're going to be very you know, they're just going to be very two-dimensional. They're not going to, you know, they're not going to be people that make any sense necessarily. So yeah, like you've got this, you know, very generic, like, and really it doesn't even make any sense when she's like, oh, well, you know, my friend saw you at the bar with this other chick, and therefore my response was to pretend to be pregnant so you'd marry me. But now I'm going to throw it in your face because, wait, what happened here again? You know, it's just like, what was the point in any of this? Like,
yeah, it was just another emotionally stunted male, not to to go to his mental illness. But an emotionally stunted male, because of this lack of anybody caring for him or really caring for him since he was 9, possibly a product of the system and in and out of foster homes and things like that. I see it as, yeah, it is that caricature of that, but we see way too many men that become the embodiment of that caricature in real life.
Yeah, and I'm always surprised.
Mhm.
I think it's because I've seen it like mocked so often in like popular culture. I'm like, oh, is that no? That's really you? Oh,
Yeah.
because I thought it was a joke.
No, there's a lot of guys like that. But can we just like speculate on why did she even want to marry him?
That's
Like, I mean, what does it say about her self-worth that she actually would think like, oh, he's like hooking up with some other woman. I gotta like lock my claws into that. What? Take
So
him to the curb. Get
I have
rid
a
of them.
theory on this.
Ooh, okay.
And my theory is that Malcolm has been in jail or wherever else for so long that he's listening to other people's stories. And those stories are, of course, incomplete. And then they're what he can understand of them. And I'm sure I'm going way over the actual writing that took place here. But like if you went that far, it would actually sort of make sense if he's been like piecing together that this is what happens out in the world. And then it's like becoming real in his head. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's just a theory, but I find
it's not a bad theory.
I find it weird that his personalities have relationships with each other, because like the doctor seems like, oh, this is the first time they're going to find out about each other. Like 3 of them are a family. They've been together. They don't know about each other. I don't know. That's weird to me. How do they coexist together? How are these 2 married? How, like, these things don't make sense to me. If everybody was their own person when they arrived, that would make more sense with the plot for me. But the relationships between them is very confusing for me with the ending.
I also noticed something that was weird in the way that they phrased things like towards the end. And I can't remember now which character said it, but when they were talking, like they were naming all these people as possessions of one another. Let me see if I can find my little note on it. But it was just basically like, oh, well, he killed, your husband. He killed your mom and he killed your actress. Like it was always this weird, like possessive, like, oh, look, he has taken a person that belonged to each one of us. And it was an odd, but that's, yeah, James, I hadn't thought about that. The fact that they do have these relationships with one another. So, I mean, maybe the point with the doctor was just that they were all coming face to face.
I don't know. It was just very strange to me.
I mean, is it possible for a personality that exists in someone's mind to, I'm struggling with the right words to use for this. I was going to say have their own imaginary friends. Like, was the mother actually a personality? Because we see next to nothing from her.
No, I don't believe that she is.
So I'm wondering whether she really wasn't a personality, but it is confusing because it does seem like the stepdad was. So I don't really know how to reconcile that with Timmy, but maybe what they just mean is that this is the first time that they were going to become aware of each other, like fully in terms of who they really were. I don't know.
Which is strange because then they're not allowed to do that. They're killed off instead.
Well, it didn't really make sense to me. I mean, I'm certainly not a professional on treating multiple personality disorder, but it didn't make sense to me in terms of this idea that he was killing off his personalities. Can you actually do that? Like, or is this how you do that? Like, it seemed like this was something that was being prodded into happening in order for him to win his hearing, the way that the doctor presented it at the end. And that was, if there was one little thread that where it really fell apart for me, that would be the one that I would tug on, because I'm not really sure that, I don't think that it has any bearing on a legal sense. I mean, either he's insane or he isn't. And it doesn't matter if he's killed off all of his personalities, then wouldn't he not be insane anymore? So wouldn't he be capable? I don't know. I mean, I'm going to talk myself in legal circles, and I'm not a legal professional either. So,
well, and even then, like, how can you prove that? Like, I don't know. I could
We
just
opened
tell
up and
you.
we counted.
Yeah, right?
We opened a skull up and we counted, and now there's only one, and there used to be 10. But I will say, when we say that the mom wasn't one of the personalities, she got a key card countdown.
Oh,
She was counted in the key card countdown.
that makes
That's true.
I do like the mom is one of my favorite things to think about in regards to how it plays into Malcolm overall, because his mom is literally just laying in a bed all day long. She's not a mom. She's not there for him. She's just laying in a bed all day. And I think that says a lot about him.
That is because a good mother is just an idea to him. He doesn't know how a good, loving mother would act. He doesn't know what she would say. And that's also why George doesn't really know what he's doing. He doesn't, Malcolm doesn't have a clear idea of a father because his biological father was never around. Whether or not he may have had someone wandering in occasionally taking that role, it's obvious that that's also something he struggles with because, I'm a step parent, and definitely I thought it was interesting, James, that you pointed out that earlier where George was struggling with the identity of being a father. Like, oh, well, I'm not really his father. I'm this addition, this sort of extraneous person. But it's, which is interesting because that is something you kind of deal with to an extent as a step parent, but again, it's like just the central personality floundering with what would a father do? What does a supportive, like, good father do? What does a real parent do in these instances? And I think that could be why, in particular, the mother was not remotely fleshed out, and the stepfather was just sort of pretty bumbling.
No, that makes sense to me. As a step parent, I get that, and the step parent thing is interesting because you face a lot of assumptions that people put on you when you're a step parent. It's like it is a beautiful role, and it is a horrible role to fulfill.
Yep.
So, and sometimes simultaneously, because everybody has their presumptions and their expectations, especially about stepmothers. And so, going back to something that you said earlier, James, right, about our responsibility as writers with mental health. There's, this is another place where we see how centuries of fiction, particularly fairy tales, have perpetuated stereotypes about stepmothers and step parents that have they're still part of our mainstream and part of our attitudes today in terms of how we judge people. I think that was like the worst thing when I moved here because I'm Canadian. So I moved to the States. My husband is American. And I have stepchildren, and so I'm already getting the cold shoulder from people because I'm the stepmom. And then somebody said something to me about Thanksgiving the first year that I was here. I was waiting in the parent pickup line for the kids, and somebody said something about Thanksgiving, and I just happened to mention how I was looking forward because I never celebrated American Thanksgiving before. And they turned around and started talking to somebody else and never spoke to me again because I wasn't American. I guess. I don't know.
That's stupid.
Just,
celebrate both. Get it 2 months in a row. That sounds great.
Oh, I do. My husband cooks Canadian Thanksgiving for me every year. So
nice.
Yeah. I mean, come on. That's the way that you're going to do it, right?
I got to ask, how different is Canadian Thanksgiving?
I mean, it's not, it really isn't hugely different. It's just that we celebrate on a Monday in October. So it's still kind of nice out. You can go walk, take a nice fall walk, and enjoy this nice long weekend. You don't go psycho crazy shopping for Christmas presents the next day, which is really nice because it's actually relaxing. Yeah, or later that night. I mean, man, my first few years here were like, woo! This whole Black Friday thing was just crazy, But I mean, like the food's the same and whatnot, but the level of importance is different. In America, it's Thanksgiving is the big family holiday, even more than Christmas, and I would not say that's the case in Canada. So,
also, nobody gets shot during it.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, you should have led with that. Now we understand.
Yeah. you guys were talking about step parents, and I will never forget one of my good friends. He's a stepfather, and when he had a son with his wife, somebody else said, "Your real son," and he lost his shit. I mean, it was amazing, and I had so much respect for it because he's like, "There's no difference there. There's no differentiation. I'm not going to treat this one different because he's my genes." Like I still raise this child every day. I still teach them. They're my family. And that has always stuck with me as just one of those moments where I really respected one of my friends because it's something I've never thought about. I had kids when I married my wife, so she's a step parent, but I've never been one. And so I see her, like what she deals with, or the level that it affords her sometime to not be a direct parent. But that's about it. So like really watching my friend react to that will always stick with me. And I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that. So never mind. I'll just be over here in the corner.
Kudos to your friend, though. Kudos to him, because I mean, that's what you want?
Yeah,
from a step parent.
It's on point, and it's also, but it is an interesting verbal path to walk sometimes, because I will say that sometimes. So, like when I do my acknowledgments, I always acknowledge my stepson. That I say to Arthur Wells, who will always be my oldest kid. Because I'm also wary of I mean, he was like 10 when I met his dad. He was 12 when we got married. And I don't want to, he has a mom, Yeah. So in some ways I struggle with, I don't want to say, I'm your mom, you're my kid, in an exclusionary way, because,
Sure.
He has a great relationship with her. They're fine and everything. So I don't know. I struggle with that a little bit, but we're also, neither one of us is super sensitive about it. So I mean, but it's, I mean, but yeah, it can just be a different relationship. I was also very young. I'm only 13 years older than him. So in some ways, I think it's my role was very, very different because I was only 23 when I met Arthur. So but I mean, I don't know. Now I'm going off on a tangent, but yeah, it's a minefield. It's a minefield.
No, that's actually really interesting to me because my friend I was talking about, the father is not in the picture at all. So I didn't even consider how that makes a difference as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, I also overthink absolutely everything.
Not me. Never have once. Feel free to laugh, Sandra. It's fine. Just be like, oh, this guy seems like he overthinks everything. It's true.
Because he does. That is true.
Yes.
Well, Sandra, I was going to ask you about, because you brought up the burial ground thing.
Oh, thank you.
We were watching.
Yeah, I really hate that component. Yeah, and I wanted to say that I was really kind of hoping that I could give them the benefit of the doubt and say that the reason that it was brought up was because it came from Ginny, and she was reading the pamphlet in the lobby or whatever. In the beginning, it's just a quick couple seconds of screen time to see her picking up this pamphlet about the burial grounds. And so to me, it reinforced the idea that she was young and impressionable. And this is how she got this crazy, stereotypical idea, rather racist idea. However, when I believe it's Ed is going around looking for the escaped convict, he pushes a gate and there is a sign on there that says burial grounds. So, I mean, it made it a little harder for me to see that as purely a character building element. I don't know. I don't like it. I won't say the word. I won't say the I word. So I really hate.
I was like, what word?
No, I really, really hate that trope.
Yes.
And they don't overplay it, but even that it's mentioned is unfortunate, I think.
It's unnecessary.
It's lazy.
Yes.
Because it's that's the go-to with everything. Oh, what's going on here? Clearly an indigenous burial ground. That's what we've got going on here. Now, the one thing I did think was interesting here was she made mention, and I've forgotten now the exact verbiage that she used. She made mention about I think the government moving a tribe there.
Right. And they died because there was no water.
Yeah. And so to me, it's like, I feel like it's possibly a little bit mitigating that it's not like, oh, this is, this tribal savage, we can't understand this. It's all mystical and whatever burial ground. There was a nod to the fact that no, what would be fucked up in this situation is what goes on here, the way that people were treated, the way that they died unnecessarily because they were not seen as people. So in a way, to me, that mitigates it a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I do still think it's
I think that I mean, I don't have the numbers or anything, but if you stop and think about it, a very high percentage of indigenous nations were relocated. So it's hard to really know how you splice that out. But at the same time, if they died because they were forced onto land where there was no water, then it suggests that their spirits may be angry, which fits right into the trope. So I wasn't really sure how to feel about that. In terms of screen time, it's absolutely minimal, and I think less than a minute total in the entire movie. It's just the thing that bothered me the most, because it is such a racist stereotype.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I don't know what to think about their choice to include that, but I really was hoping to kind of mitigate it as being evidence that Ginny was young and impressionable. But I'm not quite sure if you can. So I don't know.
For me, it was just distracting. It was like, what does this have to do with anything at all? And there's so much going on. And I feel like it was thrown in as just another red herring to give you a new theory of what the hell's happening while we're watching. Like for a bit, it's, this convict, he's the killer. And then it's, this cop isn't really a cop, he's the killer. And I felt like it was just another piece of that. It was just another thing thrown at us to confuse us. And I don't know. Personally, I just hated it because it didn't even make sense. So
it makes me wonder if there was more to it in an original version and things got cut.
Is it
I don't know.
Another personality out there?
I don't know if there was another personality out there per se, but I thought maybe there might have been a little bit more to that storyline. But because as it was, I feel like we didn't really. They're dealing with a lot in the time frame of this movie, so kudos to them, because when you watch it, it is very tight. The references are coming. Until you know the ending, you don't necessarily pick up on them. But if you go back and you rewatch it, you're picking up things all over the place that mean something to the characters or to different facets of the plot. So it is a really tight story. But we get with some of the characters, we do get more superficial stories than with others. And I don't know if that's because of the time and the budget or what have you, or if that was always planned to be that way. So, I'm not sure if there was maybe just a little bit more, because we don't really get a whole lot of Ginny and Lou, really. I mean, Lou is like hardly there.
I feel like they killed the characters I didn't like right away. They were like, oh, this actress is annoying, she's gone. This is like the only movie that's ever done this. Usually it's, oh, you like that guy? Too bad.
George R.R. Martin had nothing to do with this. Let's kill the Karen first. After the Karen, we're going to go for the jerk. Or one of the jerks.
I was going to say the Chad, but whatever.
The Chad, yeah. Man, that's hard. I do like some Chads. Sorry, Chads. Brock. Let's go with Brock.
Yeah.
Kill the Brock. Fuck you, Brock Turner. You ruined the name for everyone. Good.
Exactly.
Also, it sounds like someone vomiting. Brock! All right, I'll move on. I'm sorry. I hate that guy so much. Please proceed.
Amazing. While we're on the subject of things that make absolutely no sense, first, the simple fact... No, not Brock. That makes perfect sense. I meant the...
I thought you just meant me in general.
No, I meant the burial ground.
There
but... the fact that they go out of their way to say there was no water when everything is flooded was really funny to me, and I don't feel like that was meant to be funny. But things that don't make sense. This dude in the fridge, like this whole sub story is so fucking weird. I'm like, what was the point?
Whose name is also Larry, and like
absolutely.
How
His
much
name's
time does
also
this?
Larry.
I don't know how much time this Malcolm guy like is dead frozen Larry also a personality that just died a natural death in his banquet
That would
pot
be my.
pie?
Oh, what if he's not even dead though? That would be my favorite personality. Who am I talking to? I was so cold in here. You know? Did he have
Anytime
a
he
key?
complains about being cold and doesn't move a whole lot. Dead Larry.
But you know, I do feel like it's a little contradictory. Like Uncle Teardrop's character, I'm sorry, he'll always
Don't
be
ask
in
me
Winter's Bone in my head.
Oh, okay.
Which is why I keep calling him Uncle Teardrop. I know you're like, who? But his character seemed pretty savvy while they were searching around, and he seemed to have enough wherewithal to know like things that he should hide that might be incriminating against him and things like that. I mean, he's been there for how long, and he didn't take care of that body? Like what?
Well,
because obviously it's been a while because that guy froze solid. Nah, that body been there for a while because it was frozen solid.
He didn't even know how much to charge for a room.
$30.
$30.
Kind of tells you what kind of places Malcolm's mom was going to.
That's true.
Yeah, well, you know. I mean, hey, you know, there really wasn't a whole lot to bring you to that particular motel, you know, out in the middle of nowhere.
That's why I would charge more. If you're there, there's a reason. So, you know.
Yeah, you're trapped.
I don't know, but that's another, I know we just made fun of this, but that's another one of those lines that always just entertains me as a writer. Like these things that we write that I swear are just there to entertain us. And his name was also Larry is one of those lines for me, because I just picture myself writing something like that and just giggling about it for no reason. And then people read it and they're like, what is the significance of this? And I'm like, it was funny.
This is my brother. What is it? This is my brother
Daryl.
This is my other brother Daryl.
That's
obvious.
His name was Larry too.
Yeah. His name is Larry too.
Don't start that. We've really gone off the rails here.
This movie was never on the rails.
That's true.
If we're going to bring that up,
podcast.
if we're going to bring up the two Larrys, we've got to admit how funny it is that the little boy's name is Timmy.
Yeah.
Because there was no way. As soon as that happened, I called him Timmy before I even knew what his name was. I said, "Oh, there's little Tim. Oh, little Timmy had to see his mom get hit by a car." And then I'm watching. I'm like, "Oh shit, his name actually is Timmy."
Little Timmy is wearing some khakis and a belt, and he's got his hair like slicked to the side. I don't know what was going on with little Timmy there.
That should be the first indication that the kid was a serial killer,
right? Because he put up with that.
Hey, that might have been his choice.
That's true. If you like, don't you want to wear like this Spider-Man t-shirt? No, bring me the polo. I would also like a small members only jacket.
It's a good thing he didn't wear that Spider-Man
around my neck.
It's a good thing he didn't wear Spider-Man with Doc Ock running around being his doctor.
That's true.
I'm like, how long did it take us to get to this?
I was going to say it right away, but...
I have to say, like, and that's, again, I feel like maybe that goes to the whole, like, dude doesn't have a whole lot of experience with, like, actual people because it's so generic. Timmy. Yeah. But I would also like to just address here that anytime I'm reading a book or watching a movie and the first, like, kid that comes along, oh, Billy, I turn it off and I throw the book away. I'm like, fuck off. If that's where you go immediately with it, then shut up. If you're going to spend that little time on choosing the name for your character, then I just don't think you've addressed this very well. That's just me. It's a thing.
Check out my new book, Billy and Timmy, coming in March.
I'm sure that Laurel will blurb it for you.
I mean, I probably will, but I'm going to make fun of him the entire time.
It'll just say, he put no thought into this. Laurel Hightower.
Fuck you, fuck Timmy, fuck Billy, and fuck Brock. He's not even in the book, but fuck Brock.
Always. Fuck Brock.
Oh my.
I think it's good for regular reminders that Brock Turner's a complete fucking jackass and his dad should be shoved into traffic. All right, now that we covered that.
Tell us what you really think. I mean, you know.
Dude, with his whole, it's gonna ruin his life for 20 minutes of action. I feel like the whole world should have slowed to a stop at the moment he said that. It should have been like stretched onto action, just like where you realize that everything's gone straight to hell. Fuck off, Brock Turner's dad. I don't even know what his name is. Let's look it up.
Brock Senior.
Yeah, but
Brock
this is when you're
His name is probably like Brett
probably.
or Chet.
Oh, it's Timmy.
What if it's Chad? What if it's Chad?
I hope it's Timmy. That'll show you all.
Dan Turner.
But you know, this is when you realize this is how so many people think. So, you know, which is kind of, you know, does kind of steer back into the movie a little bit because the attitudes towards men and women are, you know, critical throughout this entire movie. And Uncle Teardrop's attitude towards, you know, Paris is you know, is the foundation, you know, the professional slut comments and the, you know, when she says to him, I would appreciate it if you looked at me, and he says, I don't like looking at trash. Like, I mean, it's just the seething hate, and it's so out of the blue. Like,
and it's coming from a dude who has a dead man in his freezer. Like,
and who probably, you know, hasn't had a girlfriend in ever.
Certainly not in the last
You know.
several months while he's been basically
Making $30
embezzling money from a dead guy.
Making $30 a room and sleeping in a little camper in the middle of
Trash, lady.
It would make so much more sense if he also found a giant crop of weed while he was there. Like, if this dude was just like high and people kept giving him $30, I would get it. But as it is, it's very strange. Like, take the $30 the first night and leave. Why were you still there? You know?
People
Because
kept
more
showing up,
$30.
James.
All the rooms were full.
Instead, he didn't have any gas. He was on empty.
The truck worked just fine to run people over.
And also,
Well,
she
and
drove off in it later.
And yeah, and that's kind of, you know, the thing. Like, you know, he probably, if somebody kept showing up, I mean, he could have siphoned some gas. So I don't know.
Taking their
Maybe
car.
he thought, but maybe he thought that this was his chance to really start over again, and this was where he was going to do it.
Exactly, $30
saw there was
a pop.
There was a nameplate on the desk that said Larry, and it really spoke to him as he finally found his
It was a
place
sign.
in life. A literal
All I
sign.
have to do is move this guy's face out of this congealed gravy. Get out of here.
Scoot over, Larry. I need a beer.
And put his picture away because we can't have his picture out on the desk.
Oh, that'd be awkward. Because I know that I usually look at the pictures of the fucking managers.
Hey, that's not you.
Well, you know, to me it seemed odd because don't we usually put pictures of our friends and family like around us? Do we put pictures of ourselves up? Like, I mean, really? Like,
I don't know how good's the picture. Do I look hot? Then yes. I'm going to put that up.
I only have pictures of Don in my house. So
Makes sense. Makes sense.
They
It still
came
was
with the
one from
frame.
the boudoir shoot, right?
yes, they came with the
Okay.
frame. He used to be a model. If this is your first time listening to our show, I'm sorry.
I will have to say, just because I don't know about it, and I really just like, so Amanda Pete's character, Paris, when there's like three of them left, and like the roof's caving in, and she's going to, she goes, I give up, and I'm like, this is me. I just wrote down, I give up, it me. Because yes, like it's exhausting. You're running around. There's a fucking electrical thing dancing in the parking lot. People are dying left and right. I'm tired. The roof just caved in. I'm actually done. Come kill me.
And people just keep telling you to go babysit. Why did you leave room 3? Yeah.
Go stand over there. Literally, at one point, she's like, I told you to stand over there. Why? Why this particular spot? Like, no, I'm not going to just because you told me to. What's the purpose? I don't know. Seriously.
I love that she's the strongest woman in the movie. I really do love that because it's like she's the one who has the most autonomy. She's not just a label. She really has a personality and identity, and she makes her own choices. And damn you, I'm not going to listen to you just because you're a man. Good for her.
It is good for her, but I also wonder why the other women have to be such unlikable caricatures. Like, why is Karen such a Karen? I know that's not really her name. I forgot and I don't care. She does suck. But you've got, they're just such characters. But again, I'm sure that goes back to, I'm not used to actually thinking very hard about movies, so it hurts my face a little. So it always takes me a while to get there. Yeah, I mean, this guy is, he doesn't know people very well. He doesn't know women very well, and he jumps to immediate conclusions, I guess. Generalization.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably locked in a room in a motel while his mom was working, and maybe he saw some episodes of Leave It to Beaver or something, and thinks that this is how things are supposed to be. I don't know. I mean, if you look at Timmy's family, like they feel almost out of time, even with how they're dressed and carry themselves, But I mean, but I don't feel like we've spent nearly enough time talking about Ed and how interesting his character is, because, Ed is the one who, from the start, that there's more to him than meets the eye. And it's interesting to me how this movie highlights how we just make assumptions about people based off of the trappings that we're presented with. So this guy drives up in a cop car, right? I mean, and he's got somebody in handcuffs with him. And so people just assume that he really is law enforcement. And I went back and I rewatched the beginning today because I really wanted to verify this. Like, he actually does show Larry, the front desk manager, the law enforcement ID, but he's holding his hand over the picture part when he does it, and it's outside. So
that's awesome.
But that's the only person who sees his ID. And because of the car, and because he's got somebody in handcuffs with him, nobody else asks. Everybody just takes it at face value. But with John Cusack's character, like, there's more to this guy than meets the eye. He's got a gun in his limo car, first of all, and then he's stitching up a woman with a needle and thread. Like, this guy is not your average limo driver. There's more to him. And so then when we start to hear, but when that he used to be a cop and you go back and you look at it, he actually is the one who acts like a cop far more so than the guy who everybody accepts as law enforcement. Like, when they find the head in the dryer, the fake cop, Officer Rhodes, just starts reaching in there to grab something, and it is Ed who's like, "What are you doing? Here, use this." Like, don't just go touch evidence with your bare hands. Like, what are you doing? Like, and
I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like once all the pieces are in place and you go back and you look and you go, that's what I mean by the tight writing. Like, there's just all these little subtle things that tell us, because if we don't just believe the labels that people put on other people, but you look at their actions, it betrays so much about them. So, and Ed was dead on the money about Timmy from the start, because he actually says to the stepdad, is he okay? And he mentions how, he's a little concerned because he hasn't really been saying anything. And that was when the stepdad said, his father 2 years ago, he left, little temper problem. This is this great sleight of hand, because you assume that the temper problem was about the biological dad. Ooh. But of course, we're going to learn something about Timmy later. That's probably an indication of why the biological dad actually left, and that could tell us what Malcolm really thought about why his dad wasn't in the picture. That maybe his dad thought that he was bad seed. It was his fault that his dad left. Could have been.
Oh, that's
his mother.
good.
Well, I don't know. Yeah. But I did find it interesting going back and taking a look through that beginning again to notice Ed's instincts about the kid were dead on the money. So, it was just, and yet, because he had been a cop but wasn't currently a cop, you still get this deferral more so to Officer Rhodes throughout. It's a very gradual shift, and it really isn't until Amanda Pete's character finds out the truth that you get that abrupt shift away from just automatically trusting Officer Rhodes. So it's interesting. If I show up with a badge in a cop car, people are just going to automatically assume, right? The doctor, he really kind of illustrates how a person's, you can be in a career, you can be considered a professional, you can even be considered an expert, and you can spend tons of time with somebody and still not have a fucking clue about anything. Yeah. Because he clearly did not know fully what was going on with his own patient and underestimated his patient, to his demise. It's so I thought that was a rather fitting end, because I think that it just underscores how, do you ever really know anybody?
No, and I don't think you do.
Don't. No, I mean, we all know facets of people. And, and I have to say on a personal note, that kind of reiterates to me something, in this social media age and this quick judgment age, to remember that, just because you've seen a person make this misstep or this statement, you're only seeing a part of the whole. You're not seeing the whole. It makes it really hard to know who to trust, who to work with, who's, a total piece of crap. And and who's a good person who just misstepped. It's we've become really quick on the snap judgments, and anyway, it's just something I thought about with the ending of the movie.
You bring up a good point that could even be expanded, because it's not just about not knowing someone else. Like, there's also the aspect that we don't really know ourselves in a lot of cases. We think we know who we are, but even if you're put into a situation, we will often speculate how we would react or respond in a certain situation. I want to save James from talking about him running away from stuff, because that's normally what he'll say he'll do. But if it's a dangerous situation, you don't know how you're going to react until you find yourself there, right? And in response to that, you end up learning a little bit more about what your limitations are, what your boundaries are in a lot of cases. Even things as far as how you may react to people that you've already formed some type of bond with. There eventually becomes that moment where it's like, I'm not that person anymore. And even with that, like, how much your identity then gets shaped and reshaped based off of those experiences, to where, I had this conversation with my daughter where we were talking about historical figures, and I said, they're not all good, but they're not all bad. And even the ones who are all bad, there was some good in these people. So you can't look at people as absolutes, because there are moments that change their lives or redefine their character or redefine who they are with other groups of people. And we kind of have an identity in our heads that's shaped around whatever their experiences are, or exactly, the way that they responded to the situation that they were put in.
Yeah, and we get this a lot in publishing. It's something that you said about how we take people off how they've treated us and whatnot. I'm seeing this so many times with predatory presses, where people come out and they go, "Oh, but they've always been good to me." Because that's what they consider to be the standard definition of somebody's character, is how they've treated them. They don't look at the whole in terms of, okay, but they screwed over 99 other authors over here. Oh, but they've always been good to me. It's interesting how, and I think this is where we've ended up with so many conflicts in the past few years, certainly, because we've started to talk about these issues far more directly, about how, and people make statements and they don't realize that, that their statements carried bias in them, and that they were making harmful comments, and they get called out on it, and they become defensive because they don't like the insinuation that they are an ist, racist, sexist, whatever, right? And then it all snowballs from there. But if you can really step back and take a teachable moment, then I think that it's just interesting how how we really shut down the real, we have really limited assessments of who people are and what defines them, and how we evaluate their character. And I think it goes back to something you were saying at the beginning, Dawn, wasn't it? That you said about how, about that woman who, dismissed you because, you weren't the right profession. You weren't, the advantageous person who she could be getting something out of at a convention, and as an author, as an editor,
it was a fun experience.
Been there. Yeah. Oh, but I've certainly been there, and I've seen that happen so many times where you're talking to somebody and all of a sudden you get dropped like a hot potato because somebody bigger came into the room. And you see this on social media too a lot with some people who really have, really aren't very well established or whatnot, but they keep like name dropping because they feel like it somehow like makes them seem more connected. Like, anybody who knows anybody who's really famous knows that you don't share those stories on social media because you don't get invited back to their house the next time. So, watch but people are really, a lot of people really fall for that illusion of a person's power or authority or connections or whatever. So it's just interesting.
Yeah, it is. And I think, I don't know too, when you mentioned earlier about like, like social media and, the small like microcosm information that we get there and this sort of thing. I think too, it's like sometimes that's viewed as like people will say like, oh, well, you're only seeing a very small snapshot of their lives as though that's a lie someone's putting forth. You know what I mean? Like, oh, well, there's really this other stuff going on. But there's so much pressure to, I don't know, there's so much pressure to show those things, to be, like, God, if you put something on there where someone thinks you might need some emotional support or something, you're going to get bullshit from people. Right. And, and I know that my like personality type, this kind of like need to be liked and all this kind of stuff, like, I have to struggle with the need to feel and appear perfect all of the time, not because I want people to think I'm perfect and envy me, but because I don't want to be a burden to anybody. Okay. Right. So I want to look like the perfect mom or the perfect whatever, or, somebody who just doesn't need anything and doesn't need any help. And I don't know, I guess to me, this is all kind of related in my head with the whole like identity thing, is like, because sometimes we just hear so often, like, be yourself, be authentic, be yourself. Well, sometimes people don't really mean that. And the other part is like, I don't know about y'all, but sometimes I don't even know what is authentic, right? Because I'm so used to living up to what other people are asking me to do. And like from childhood on, you have all these things that you're expected that, I mean, gosh, just stupid things. Like my sister's a teacher, and, Dawn, you probably run into this too, but she teaches like, sixth graders, and these personalities get assigned to these kids from one grade on up. They're like, oh, so-and-so's a troublemaker, look out for them. Right. So-and-so's the class clown. And it's like, my God, these are children. They could be anybody in 6 months from now. So I don't know. That's kind of, I kind of think about it on the other side, on the whole, what we see in public kind of thing.
Well, I mean,
yeah, I agree.
What I'm going to say might sound like I'm half joking, and I think I kind of am, but I think it also ties into all of this. If you look at my social media, if you followed me on everything I'm on, my Facebook, my Twitter, and my Instagram, we'll just use those. I also have Slasher, but like if you looked at each of those, there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of the same jokes. But then there's also, this is something I'd share on Facebook, but not on Twitter. And this is something I would post on Twitter, but there's no way in fuck I'd put this on Instagram. And I think about how those are almost identities, the same way that, like, in my daily life, my work identity, I'm still a total goofball, asshole, whatever, but it's still different than I am in my house or if I was out with my friends. And how I am with my friends is different than in my house. How I am at a con is different than how I am anywhere. How I am on this show is different. And these are all individual little identities in a way as well. And number one, I think it'd be fascinating for them to meet. Like if my Instagram person met my Facebook person, they'd be like, holy shit, what is this fire? You know, like, but like, I think about that in my daily life too. Like if the person that I present at my day job were to meet the person who bitches about life to Laurel on a daily basis, you know, like these things are all me and they're all authentic, but they're also what I'm willing to put in each place and how that becomes an identity. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, because we all have facets of ourselves, and they come out in different contexts. You know, and when you talk about all of the different aspects of yourself meeting, like what usually happens to me is that opinionated Sandra goes and does or says something, and then it's the very respectful, polite, obedient Sandra that ends up getting yelled at for it because I'm, in a different mode by the time that whoever catches up with me. and then I'm very confused, and very upset because I'm a nice person, and I didn't mean this or that or whatever, No, it's just interesting to me because I look at this in terms of how I react to things, and I can literally see or maybe not literally, but I can see myself gear shift in my head into different parts of my personality depending on what's called for in the situation. And and in many ways it's a coping mechanism because I'm of such an age that it's it wasn't acceptable. I mean, when I came into publishing, in 2007, my first book came out. But when I was kind of entering into fiction publishing, it wasn't acceptable to really talk about not having a college degree and coming from a blue collar background and having actually worked with your hands as opposed to working with your head and having had to struggle and having had parents who were high school dropouts. And then you add in things like the mental health issues, which are prevalent in my family. And it wasn't okay to talk about struggling with depression. It wasn't okay to talk about having ADHD. It wasn't okay to talk about even, high functioning autism. You wanted to mask as much of what were considered the unacceptable facets of your personality as possible to conform to this acceptable image in order to be accepted by the larger publishing community. And, and you get that I'm sure that you get that in loads of other industries as well, but it's something that I've thought a lot about when it comes to publishing. I think it's great that things have opened up in a different way now, but we're still getting that, stereotypical, perspectives being imposed on people. I've seen this with some authors that I know who, fit into different minority groups, Black writers, Indigenous writers, where they get told, "Oh, you're not the kind of quote unquote I word that I'm looking for," because you don't look the stereotypical way that I expect an person to look, or what have you, And so I think I think it's a great topic, and it's important because people are talking about their identity more than ever now, and we're trying to break down these barriers. And I don't know if it's going to help us, break apart. We all know that there's certain situations where we shouldn't be, telling people to just fuck off left, right, and sideways. And so we modify our behavior. And sometimes that goes as far as having a different personality in different environments.
Right.
Because we behave a certain way in those environments. But it's certainly not the same as having multiple personalities. It's just, but anyway, different facets of ourselves. I find the whole subject fascinating. So, and I think I think the last few years have prompted me to really evaluate myself in a different way, but also come to a greater degree of self-acceptance than ever before, because I'm feeling less pressure to meet up to other people's expectations of what an author should be like, what an editor should be like. I mean, I make my living writing full-time nonfiction research articles and have done so for years. And I did study journalism. a lifetime ago, and so there's this part of me, and I still feel like an imposter in publishing. Isn't that bizarre?
I don't think so. I think that's one thing I would love to tell new writers. New writers constantly talk about imposter syndrome, and I don't think that they understand that everyone I've ever met in the comic industry, in writing world, we all still talk about it. And I'm talking people I've looked up to for 20 years in the comic industry. I'm like, you made this character that everyone loves. And they're like, well, somebody's going to find out and they're going to come get me. Like
Yeah.
I literally had a conversation with Stan Lee, the guy who made comics, period, and like he said the same thing. He was like one day people are going to find out that, it's all just made up. And it's like, that's so crazy that you never get rid of that. And I feel like a lot of new writers in particular, at least how it reads on Twitter, it feels like they think that's going to go away sometime. And so I'm always excited when people bring it up.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the ones you want to stay away from are the ones who definitely feel like they've arrived.
Yes. I was going to just say, I think that it's a sign that you're on the right track. If you're doing things that you're like, fuck, they're going to find out I don't belong here. Hey, you're making progress.
Right.
Oh, dude,
yeah,
case in point, the entire Stanley event we're planning. I keep waiting for an adult to come by and say, excuse me, who do you think you are? Why do you think you can just do an event like this?
Yeah,
Sorry.
That's an hour-long conversation in and of itself.
Fucking Hightower. That's why.
Exactly.
In those instances when I'm in trouble, because I am, I'm going to try and think of somebody I would throw under the bus. I am Brian fucking Keene. I can do whatever I want. Sorry, Brian. I'm just gonna.
Well, Brian can do whatever he
know
wants.
Exactly, which is why I would just like throw his name out there to confuse them and then run away very fast.
Oh man, that's great. That's why I tell people I'm Don Guillory.
I can't wait to see Brian Keene's Twitter on February 15th.
Sorry, Brian.
He'd be like, hey, I listened to this podcast for the first time. Oh.
Now anyway. I feel awkward about ever talking about weird. I don't know why I'm being blamed for things, but this explains a lot. I'm just going to blame Reese Witherspoon. Haven't you seen my book recommendations? That was always that was always who I got compared to. That was who I was told when I was a teenager, like, you look like Reese Witherspoon. So I'm going to start blaming shit on her.
Sweet.
Well, I'm just going to be grateful that there's a pandemic for a minute, because that way Brian won't show up at my doorstep. Since I don't live that far away.
Sorry, Brian. That's all on me. That's not Sandra.
He's going to show up there to demand how to get a hold of Laurel. No.
Yeah. He's going to have so much fun on Twitter if he hears this.
So we're all agreed that this is eventually going to be remade. Identity is, with the characters all being James's various social media personalities. Yes,
that would be amazing.
Instagram James is going to come out and meet like Twitter James, who's going to be Facebook James.
It's going to be great because the first time one of them tells a joke, everyone will be like, "That was pretty good," and then by the fifth time, they're going to be like, "Fucking stop it! Stop posting this joke. I hate you. I don't know why I follow you on all these things. I don't know why you're so bad at Instagram."
That other guy told that joke. What the fuck?
Anyway, so do you guys have anything else to add for the film before we move on to other things people should watch if they enjoyed this?
I think we covered it. I think we did great.
Well, I have 10 more things. No, okay.
Oh, okay.
So I'm kidding. All right. So yeah, we'll move into the movies people should watch if they enjoyed this. So you guys are the guests, so you can fight over who goes first.
I think it should be Sandra because I don't have any answers.
And
perfect. Don has 125, so we're gonna be okay.
113. So
well, that's great that he's got some recommendations, because in this house, my husband's the movie expert, really and truly. Like, he's seen everything. used to work in a movie theater, and yeah, so he's the one who he's always seen everything, and I've seen nothing, and that's the way that it goes when it comes to movies. So I don't really have recommendations, although I am going to put in a bizarre plug, and I'll say that when the short film Verified comes out and is available, watch that one. It's a fun one, and it definitely deals with this whole facet of social media and how how our behavior is shaped by our desire for popularity and acceptance. And I'm plugging it a little wee bit because it stars my niece, Ariel Edwards, and it also got yes, and it got a shout out today from one of the international film festivals. It's won a few awards at the film festival circuit, but it also got a shout out in an article today. So it was on my mind. It's a fun little film, and when it comes out, and I look forward to seeing what the director Ali Chappelle has coming down the line. She's got her first, I think, full length movie coming up next year, and so I'm really curious to see what she does with her career, because I think this little film is a great indication of what she's capable of.
That might be my favorite recommendation we've had on here. More people should do that. Right? That was cool. All right, so
I'm glad.
before I let Don do his, would you say you had 113? I'm going to steal one of them because I like to do a little double feature look, and I think that Identity would roll amazingly well with Gothica, and I think it would just be a fantastic night of what the fuck is going on.
Good call.
And I think that'd be great. All right, Don, you're up.
All right, since James knew I was going to go with that one, and then went so far as to text me hours before.
I did. I was like, don't fucking steal this. I'm doing Gothica.
I'm going to start off with a couple of Stephen King ones, which would be Secret Window, 1408, or Room 1408, Number 23, Memento, Bad Times at the El Royale, 7, The Cell, Frailty, Mystic River, High Tension, Don't Say a Word, Fallen, Shutter Island, Population 436, Skeleton Key, What Lies Beneath, Traffic. I'm sorry. Not Traffic. I am thinking of a different movie. Disturbia, cool. Basic. I Know What You Did Last Summer, because there were a couple of scenes in this movie that made me think of it. And the last, but not least movie would be Crash. I don't know why I put Traffic, but I meant Crash. With, different personalities, or at least the idea of identity being strewn about and what people think about each other.
I like it.
Oh, a good one.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, let's kick it back to the two of you. Tell us where we can find your upcoming book and pre-order it. And if you feel like doing so, tell us where we can follow you on social media.
All right. Well, The Dead Inside is coming out through Dark Dispatch. And it is coming out on March the 1st, and it is available for pre-order for the ebook on Amazon. And then we should have the print book up for pre-order soon, maybe, or that might just be day of. Unsure. Sandra?
It's coming. We're waiting on the full cover.
Oh, right. Okay.
And so that's the only delay really at this point. If we put it up for pre-order and there's a cover change 72 hours prior, it locks in. So we need to have that. We need to be sure that we have that set in place beforehand. So it's coming. The format is all done. Yay. It's just adding in the cover. So it's been a crazy year. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
But we're getting there. And even if the book comes out a couple days late, I mean, I would rather have the cover right than have there be any issues. But the pre-order is up on Amazon. You can always find information by visiting the website, which is darkdispatch.com. And Dark Dispatch has Twitter. I think it's dark_dispatch. I don't know, because I don't really tweet or pay attention to my Twitter handles. very much. But Dark Dispatch does have Twitter out there, and does tweet updates when there's new content on the site and whatnot. I think next week we're going to have an alternative snack list for Valentine's Day for people who are fans of serial killer movies. So that's what we'll be hosting on Valentine's Day at Dark Dispatch.
Sweet.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'm all about the snacks.
Or perhaps maybe a little salty. I don't know, since it's anyway.
All right. Well, thank you both for coming on today and talking about this film with us, and for making me revisit it, because it's one of those movies that I thought that I knew inside and out because I loved it so much, 15 years ago or so now. And rewatching it, like, I was so into this film, and now I love it all over again.
Well, thank you so much for
Thanks.
having us.
Yeah,
Thanks for being here.
All right. So I guess that wraps it up for another week. As always, I am James Sabata.
And I am Larry.
And he is also Larry, and we're all in my head. And we'll be back here next week at thenecronoma.com.